Well, welcome to Father and Son. Tom is here on my right. We're going to discuss the budget this morning, last night's budget announcement. We have a special guest in Gary Morgan, who's the chairman of Morgan Research and also the chairman of Haoma Mining. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, John.
All right, Tom, your view of the budget.
Well, I think the big shock in the budget was actually the resources tax, which was announced 10 days ago as part of the Henry tax review. What was surprising last night was that looking through all the assumptions and whatever, which are probably overly optimistic, although interesting last year the assumptions about growth and everything were overly pessimistic, there wasn't really anything that new or that unexpected in the budget. So leaving aside the resources tax, which I think is a bad move.
And the cigarette smokers tax.
And the cigarette smokers tax, which is obviously a bad move. Last night's budget, to be honest, was pretty benign. I mean, assuming the forecasts are correct, the government clearly sees electoral advantage of getting back to surplus in 3 years. Now, whether that happens is anyone's guess.
What did you think, Gary?
Well, where Tom is wrong or has underestimated the influence of the budget is the massive tax on the mining companies. And the budget is assuming that mining will continue at the way it has over the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, the budget has assumed that the amount of revenue from mining in Australia will go up. There's no doubt that revenue from mining in Australia may go up in the short term, but actually will decline if this massive resource tax is implemented in Australia.
And what happens if they don't, if the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, stop it in the Senate? What's it going to do to their budget?
Well, it's going to make it a very different figure in 3 years' time. What the government has to do is cut spending. There's no question the only thing the government should be doing is cutting spending. They should be cutting the wage increases for public servants, both federal and then the state government should do it and local government should do it. We need to tighten our belts. We've had massive spending. It's time to tighten our belts and start getting the budget heading in the right direction. It's going to take years to get it balanced, and you won't have that unless you have sensible, prudent government decisions. Nothing sensible at the present time.
No, but you'd have to say, Gary, they're going into an election year. They really haven't given much except to say, look, aren't we very credible?
We're going to have inflation.
Let's come back to the assumptions. See, we're saying if the resources tax doesn't get through, that's a big change. What's your view, Tom, on the inflation that they predicted?
Well, they've got a pretty benign inflation figure going down to 2.5%. They've got economic growth going up to 4%, unemployment down to 4.9%. I agree with Gary. I think they're probably overly optimistic. But remember, these forecasts do come out of Treasury, and the Liberals have to use the same forecast. Where this is a politically smart budget is that if the Liberals oppose the resources tax, which they will do, then their alternative budget has a big hole in its revenue. And if they want to get to surplus quicker than what Labor says it will get to surplus, it either means, as Gary says, big cuts in spending, which aren't electorally all that popular.
Well, they won't tell them until after the election.
Or some other new tax.
What they could do is allow Rio and BHP to merge in the Pilbara. That would bring in major efficiencies in the mining industry. BHP would put some of their iron ore, or a lot of their iron ore, out through Karratha instead of through Port Hedland. It would allow more iron ore to go out of Port Hedland. The profits would jump dramatically. The tax take would be dramatic increase, and it'd be a quick increase. And all of a sudden, you've got a much more mining efficient industry in the Pilbara.
Yeah, but I can tell you that merger is not going to happen. The ACCC has made it clear they will not allow it, and it's a brave government that goes against the ACCC.
Well, if
Samuel, we've always been against him. He's no good at all. He should be sacked.
Oh no, that's not fair to say that. What the point I'm saying is this: if they take the railway infrastructure and the port infrastructure out of the mining companies and make them commercial, and make them do that, then you'll find a big increase in mining in the Pilbara and big increase in profits to Australia. There are things we can do in Australia which increase productivity. That's the only thing that matters, is increase productivity, increase profits, and then companies pay more profits. People don't get the money from, the companies don't keep the profits. They pay them out as dividends or put them back into infrastructure spending, or they put them back into spending on employment. So you do not increase company tax. Increasing company tax is the dumbest thing any government could do, Liberal or Labor.
And I've got an idea, Dad. You could do your bit by encouraging other people to smoke more, and that would increase the smoking tax.
You kill more people.
Then people would die, and we wouldn't have an aged penny. No, we've got to have a
strain on the health system. There's the answer.
Thank you very much. All right, well, You got anything else to say, you two?
Well, I just think, look, the stock market was up this morning. People like the fact that the budget doesn't have any more uncertainties in it. I thought there'd be a big new spending plan. Maybe that'll come out in the run-up to the election. But for the time being, leaving aside the resources profit tax, it's probably not a bad budget because it's trying to be fiscally responsible. Whether it succeeds is anyone's guess.
The stock market was up this morning because the Greece crisis for the short term has been solved. Gold jumped a big amount last night. It says that there's going to be massive inflation throughout the world. Once you get inflation, everyone gets rid of their debt. That's probably good. But the fact is, we're going to have inflation in Australia. If you have inflation in Australia, the budget figures are very rubbery.
All right, thank you. We'll be back when there's some other event of great note, and it's very lovely to have you here, Gary.